Hello everyone, my name is Ryan Armstrong and you're watching the second episode of the 8 Biggest Objections to Christianity, which is a video series made for the Facebook group Apologetics for Christians. In this episode we get to talk about something pretty peculiar, and that is miracles. Today's topic is the unbeliever's position that since miracles contradict science, they cannot be true. Now I'm going to explain what miracles are and explain exactly why Christians still believe them to be true despite having tangible or experimental evidence at hand. And remember, even if you don't believe, I'd like to ask you to just pretend for a few minutes that it is indeed possible. Like in my last video, look at all of this evidence that I present to you through a lens of faith in God and open your mind to the possibilities and the implications this would have on you if it were true. William Lane Craig is a research professor at Talbot School of Theology and author of many books, including one that I own called Reasonable Faith. He says in Lee Strobel's book, The Case for Faith, "Only if you believe that God does not exist, the miraculous would be absurd. But there is a creator who designed and brought the universe into being, who sustains its existence moment by moment, who is responsible for the very natural laws that govern the physical world. Then certainly it's rational to believe that the miraculous is possible." First, I think it's important that we need to clarify and clearly define what a miracle is exactly so that there's no confusion. Craig says, or he defines that a miracle is an event which is not producible by the natural causes that are operative at the time and place that the event occurs. This, however, does not make miracles contradictory to natural science in so much that it is complementary. It would be irrational for me to sit up here and say that natural science should be overturned by this miracle science, so to speak, because we're intelligent human beings that reason, and throughout time we've acquired much knowledge of the universe. But I'll also contend we aren't even close to knowing all that there is to know. Natural laws assume that there is nothing else interfering with the operation the law describes. Craig illustrates this by saying that it's a law of nature that oxygen and potassium combust when they are combined. But I have oxygen and potassium in my body, and yet I'm not bursting into flames. Does that mean it's a miracle and I'm violating the laws of nature? Well, no, because the law merely states what happens under idealized conditions. And in this case, there are other factors interfering with the combustion, and so it doesn't take place. That's not a violation of the natural law. This also applies to God, because natural laws do not take into account any supernatural agent interfering with the conditions at any given time and place. I believe people misunderstand exactly what miracles mean. It's not that science is illusion or that science is false, but people understand science as the supreme standard by which we understand the universe and existence. Now, I believe science is a good thing, but I also believe that scientism is giving these natural laws too much merit. Scientism is a worldview, hence the ism suffix, that is a belief that empirical science is the most valuable part of human education, insomuch that it eradicates all other forms of understanding and reduces all knowledge to only that which is measurable. But God isn't necessarily negating certain laws of nature when he performs a miracle. He's merely intervening. Now, I know that I needed that bit of time to explain what miracles are, but the actual objection is that miracles cannot be true. So the question arises, are they true? For this question, I think it's fitting to look at the miracles of Jesus and see whether or not they could have occurred. And for this, I think it's important to observe the miracles of Jesus, that they were recorded in all 4 Gospels. So it's very likely that the miracles he performed were part of the historicity or the historical Jesus and not just the messianic Jesus. Now, I actually have a video on the historicity and the validity of the Gospels, and I have a link for that video in the description below if you're interested in watching that video. Atheist George Smith says that the Gospels grow more exaggerated with its details the later they were written. He compared Mark 1, which says that all were brought to Jesus and many were healed, Matthew 8, which says many were brought to Jesus and all were healed, and Luke 4, which says all were brought to Jesus and all were healed. He says that, quote, "We are witnessing the progressive growth of a legend," unquote. But we also have to consider that the Gospels do not use the words all and many as a police report would. Mark 1:5 says, "The whole Judean countryside and all of the people of Jerusalem went out to him. Confessing their sins, they were baptized by him in the Jordan River." Okay, so let's think about that for a moment. Everybody went to Jesus? Every single man, woman, child, elderly person, rabbi, peasant, and all went to Jesus, and the whole town just emptied of its people to go see Jesus? Well, certainly not. But this is an exaggeration. They're merely making the point that multitudes of people were going to Jesus for healings, exorcisms, baptisms, and so forth. Also, it's good to note that the central miracle of the Gospels, which is the resurrection, didn't have enough time to become legend because of the explosion of the early Christians just after it and all the eyewitness accounts after it was recorded. Now we get to, what about other religions? Like Islam and their recorded miracles. If Muhammad performed miracles, wouldn't that take away from Jesus' special divinity? Well, Islamic tradition says that Muhammad ascended to heaven on a mule, that he healed a broken leg of a companion, he fed large groups with little food, and that he turned a tree branch into a steel sword. At first glance, this observation seems like it takes away from the truth of the miracles of the Gospels, but we also have to take into account the historicity of these reports of the supposed miracles of Muhammad. Notice that I said that these miracles are held in, quote, Islamic tradition, and are not actually recorded in their sacred text, the Quran. The Quran itself virtually has no miracles in it whatsoever except for a few disputed passages. The miracles that I mentioned were recorded in the Hadith. I'm not sure if I'm quoting that right. It might be Hadith. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. But William Lane Craig says, here's what's important. The Islamic tradition comes hundreds of years after Muhammad's life and therefore isn't comparable to the Gospels, which were written down within the first generation when the eyewitnesses were still alive. The fact that the Hadith turns up centuries after Muhammad's death shows how it actually did develop legends surrounding Muhammad. Muhammad never claimed any miracles for himself in the Quran, yet the Hadith seemed to find it necessary to invent miracles for him. Now, there are miracles from God that we continue to see each and every day for those who wish to actually notice them. God makes sense of the universe's complexity. Craig says that scientists have been stunned to discover that the Big Bang was not some chaotic primordial event, but rather a highly ordered event that required an enormous amount of information. It is far more probable for a life-prohibiting universe to exist than a life-sustaining one. Life is balanced on a razor's edge. Stephen Hawking calculated that if the rate of the universe's expansion 1 second after the Big Bang had been smaller by even 1 part in 100,000 million, the universe would have collapsed into a fireball. Now, it's pretty evident that Christians don't go around claiming that the Big Bang is what started it all, and we have good evidence to suggest that the universe was designed by God. Take, for instance, British physicist P.C.W. Davies' conclusion that the odds against the initial conditions being suitable for stars, which is a necessity for planets and thus life, is a 1 followed by at least 1,000 billion zeros. Also, Davies estimated that the strength of gravity, which is the weakest of the 4 fundamental forces of the universe, were changed by only 1 part in a 10 followed by 100 zeros. Life couldn't have developed. There are about 50 constants and quantities. For example, the amount of usable energy in the universe, the difference in mass between protons and neutrons, the ratios of the fundamental forces of nature, and the proportion of matter to antimatter that must be balanced to a mathematically infinitesimal degree for any life to be possible. The requirements of all of this information up front are enough to show how improbable existence is, without God. And if we can rationally come to the conclusion that God is a necessity for the existence of the universe and that he governs all of these forces that dictate whether we live or die, I'd say that bringing Jesus into the world by a virgin mother would be pretty simple, wouldn't you? The only thing that would be needed to have a virgin birth would be a Y chromosome. The information required to create that is infinitely less complicated than the creation of the universe. Honestly, I cannot see how anyone can accept that the universe is a creation of God and yet still claim that miracles are fantastical. People can't go around saying that it's irrational for someone to believe in the miraculous if the person that they're judging bases their existence off an all-powerful, omniscient creator. They're merely drawing lines of inference. If it's probable that an intelligent designer created existence itself, then it's much more probable that the same entity can intervene in the laws of nature that he established in the first place. It's not irrational. Now, for me, there's too much evidence from the universe's complexity not to believe that the miraculous is possible. The fact that I'm even here discussing this right now is a miracle, because existence itself is a miracle. The recording of these miracles in the Bible were written too soon for the development of legend to arise, unlike the miracles held in Islamic tradition or in the Hadith, which were written centuries after Muhammad lived. Some of God's miracles can be seen by those who wish to look upon them. Even if a person argues the universe began with the Big Bang, they still cannot answer how we still exist despite the improbability of it. I mean, it's astronomical. And also, to shed light on personal evidences, my own experiential evidence tells me that Christianity is true. I have had a personal relationship with God for a little over 3 years now, and even though it's been such a short time, I know that God is real no matter how many doubts arise, and that's because of evidences that I've always had access to my entire life. Now, I know this because I experienced God spiritually, and yes, that is still evidence. It's personal evidence. It's evidence that only I can, look upon, but it's a testimony, if you will. But see, as an unbeliever, I had access to all this information, but actually experiencing God made all of that evidence that I knew before confirm what I hypothesized to be true. Craig makes a good analogy to this by saying, let's say you're going to the office to see if your boss is in. You see his car in the parking lot. You ask the secretary if he's in, and she says, yes, I just spoke with him. You see the light from under his office door. You listen, and you hear his voice on the telephone. Now, on the basis of all of this evidence, you have good grounds for concluding your boss is in his office. But I experienced God personally, and that's like meeting the boss face to face. All of the evidence Craig cited before now becomes confirmatory of what the evidence was pointing towards in the first place. Just to reiterate what I said earlier. Now, next week we talk about something that has many people divided, and that is evolution. Does evolution take place of God? Are they mutually exclusive? How much evidence is there for evolutionary theory as opposed to the evidence against it? Now, all of these things we will discuss next week on the 25th. If you have any questions for me, feel free to inbox me either here or on the Facebook page, Apologetics for Christians. Until then, I will see you on Facebook. Jesus love.